Hi everyone, welcome to today's Transformation Talk. I'm here today with Angela Kelsey, who is a writer, a teacher, a speaker, and a survivor of domestic violence. So thank you so much for being here today, Angela.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So let's get right into it. I would love to know your story. You talk on your website about the fact that you were the sort of the antithesis of the stereotype of the kind of woman who we think gets into a domestic violence situation. So tell us how it happened for you.
I was 34 when I met my ex-husband, whose name is Lee. I really wanted to have a family. I wanted to get married and have a family, and that doing things in that order is the way that my parents just celebrated their 50th anniversary. You know, I thought that was the way my life was going to go. Lee was really charming and fun, and he was a great boyfriend, and in a lot of ways, not in every way, but in a lot of ways. And we had sort of a whirlwind courtship and got married about 11 months after we first met. And a couple weeks after the wedding it was the first time that he shoved me in an argument. And over the next 8 years, there was pretty much consistent, daily, pretty much emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and periodic episodes of physical abuse. And when there wasn't physical abuse, there were threats and breaking of my objects, my possessions seemed to get broken in his rages. And so I left a total of 3 times before and we always reconciled because of all the reasons that people reconcile in those situations. And then on our 8th anniversary, we finally were divorced. The night he was arrested was almost exactly 6 years ago now. And then we were divorced a few months later.
Wow.
And then the other piece of the story is that, which is partly why I can speak so freely, is that 3 months after our divorce was final, he died in a motorcycle accident. So he was no longer a factor of danger or threat or anything that and so I was sort of, the obstacles to speaking about it were things that were only internal rather than an external threat that so many people have post a relationship like that.
Yeah, I was curious about that because you are able to speak freely about it now.
Right.
And so were those 3 months before he died, were those scary? Did you feel safe? Did you...
The 3 months, by that point, by the time our divorce was final, I really didn't feel very afraid anymore. But during the months between when he was arrested and when our divorce was final, especially at the beginning, he had a restraining order, and I was very afraid because he wasn't always rational. And so he was unpredictable. So I was afraid. Yeah. In my book, I talk about actually buying a gun, which I never had defended myself during the whole relationship, but I had gotten to the point when I was finally ready to file for divorce and end it, that I wasn't going to let him hurt me again. So, but yeah, I was afraid that he would.
Wow. And I want to just say, you mentioned your book. You have your memoir of this marriage coming out early fall this year.
Right. It's tentatively titled Funhouse Marriage because of the fact that the relationship was so confusing and disorienting all the time. It was kind of a roller coaster in the worst way. And so it'll be coming out at late summer, early fall in print and ebook. And then October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so I want it to be available during no later than that.
Mm-hmm. So you were a really successful businesswoman at the time that you met your ex-husband and sort of had it all together and wanted this marriage and family. What what happened to you sort of inside when you realized, like, when did you realize you were in an abusive relationship?
I knew pretty much that first. I knew that first night of when he pushed me in an argument that I knew what domestic violence was. I had known about it from kind of an academic standpoint way before that, and that was part of the confusion for me, because I knew about it. So how could it be happening to me? You know, I was aware, and I knew that that I could get really hurt, and that it wasn't something that was okay in any way. But at the same time, I felt completely, even though I wasn't helpless, and there were things I could have done, especially right at the beginning, I felt ashamed, as if I had made a bad choice of a partner. And also I felt like part of the way verbal abuse worked for me is that I really believed that it was happening because it was my fault. Mm-hmm. And that if I would change in any number of ways, it would stop. And so I'm kind of a perfectionist on my own, and kind of a overachiever. So I just kind of thought that if I kept applying myself to this problem, I could solve it.
Right.
And of course I kept doing that for years and years. And I was wrong. I couldn't solve it. I couldn't make it stop. But that's what I thought at the beginning. There was a lot of shame. And also part of the way that it works, I think, for a lot of women is that, and men too, is that you become sort of isolated. So my friends were mostly our friends at the beginning of the marriage. And so there was really nobody to, even to the extent that I might have told people, there wasn't anybody who was really on my team. And I didn't tell my family. I lied. You know, I made up stories about having the flu or whatever when things had happened and I couldn't show up or whatever.
Wow. Did they suspect? Do you think?
Not really, because he was a really nice guy, and he was in a lot of ways. So people, that would be one of the conversations that he and I would have. Nobody will believe you. Nobody thinks that, and it's all your fault anyway. So, but yeah, nobody will believe you. And there's also that kind of blame the victim phenomenon that happens where people don't want to believe that somebody is doing that, is abusing his wife because he's an abuser. It's kind of easier for people, especially if he's very personable and nice, for them to believe that maybe the woman or the victim does deserve it in some way. It kind of makes some sort of logical sense to people, even though they wouldn't think of it that way. I think it's part of the situation.
Yeah. Wow. So 8 years is a long time. Mm-hmm. What finally changed for you internally that you were able to leave?
I think that the change happened. The change was gradual. Mm-hmm. It was actually quite gradual. I think somewhere maybe around the half to 2/3 point, I started to get mad, and I started, instead of feeling so helpless and hopeless and sort of, like, I remember at the beginning when various things would happen, kind of literally and figuratively curling up into a fetal position and just feeling terrible. By about the second half, I started to get angry and realized that I didn't deserve it, and it wasn't. Things had happened enough times that I knew that they were sort of random, and I wasn't. There was no way I could be driving it. And also during that time, I went back to school to get an MFA in creative writing. So in other ways, I was branching out into some other groups of people that I knew besides just kind of our people, our friends. And over time, I told a couple of them, and so I was able to get a little bit less isolated and get a little bit of new perspectives on, no, this is not okay. That was ridiculous. That was terrible. That was, you know, like the more minor incidents or conversations would be deemed ridiculous, and the terrible things. I had a couple of friends who would be able to say, no, that's unacceptable. And no, you didn't cause it. And so there was this gradual, and I drew over time gradual lines in the sand. No, I will not do this. I will not, you know, if I come home from work and we're supposed to do pretty much anything, but you're already home from work and drinking, I don't go. You know, so it was really a gradual process. But I have to admit that up until the very end, one of the things that really drove me through the whole relationship was being in my late 30s and early 40s and really wanting to have a baby and continuing to think that someday things would be good enough and everything would be fixed, and believing that that somehow it could be okay and I could have a child. So really, I was kind of taken by surprise on that last night, which I write about in detail in my book, but that led to his arrest. I would not have predicted earlier that day that was what was going to happen that day.
Mm.
You know?
So even after 8 years, there was surprise.
Yeah, I kept thinking, I was naive or conditioned or whatever enough that I kept having hope that it would somehow work out and become all right. And we went to therapy. He went to AA. I mean, we did all kinds of. I tried everything, and nothing really changed anything ultimately.
Wow. So the fact that there was this event and he was arrested, that sounds like it was the impetus that you really needed. You'd gathered all this strength and some support, and it was just that finally.
Right. I had some momentum at that time, and I knew that night, I knew at the moment that he hit me that night, before the police got there, before anything else happened, that was it.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think he knew it too. And to the extent that I can know what he thought, I think that we both knew that was it.
So how long did it take you? I mean, you started telling your story in little bits before you left him, but how long did it take you to really tell the story?
Well, I was almost at the end with some chapters of a memoir in the works at that point. And so I decided after he died that I was going to go ahead and make the book I was working on for my Master's of Fine Arts thesis for creative writing. I was going to make it a memoir about the marriage. And so that I had a thesis advisor named Lynn Barrett, who I trusted a lot, and I started working on it with her and told her the story. And she had me as a student off and on through those years, and she didn't know any of that was happening. And so the first real telling of it was in the drafts that I wrote for her, and even in the proposal for that thesis, I wrote something kind of, even though I knew that the book was going to be about my experience in an abusive relationship, I wrote something sort of vague, a little bit. I wrote something like violence, and I didn't write domestic violence. I didn't write abuse. I wrote something like violence, and the man who was the chairman of the department at FIU had to edit the approve the proposal, and he changed it to physical abuse or something like that, because I had said enough other things that he knew. And that was really kind of a turning point, because I thought, I have to call this what it is. And if I can't call it what it is, then I'm not ready to talk about it, I guess. And so I got clear about what I was doing a lot more after writing that thesis proposal. And then it was a process of writing the drafts of the thesis and showing it to my advisor. And then I had 2 other men on my committee, and they were really my first people outside my closest, my therapist and very, very close relationships who knew about it. And it was quite a it was quite an event in 2010, two years after he died, like 3 years, I guess, after we were separated, to defend the thesis with these people who knew, some things I had kept really quiet. Mm. And I started blogging. I started blogging anonymously at the beginning, and gradually changed the website address and put my own name on it. And 2 years ago, I started talking to groups, which was a whole other dynamic, which has been really, really good. And it has been a process for sure of talking about it and being willing to say that it's part of my story. It's something that happened to me and shaped me, but I don't have anything to be ashamed of because of it. And the other thing that has been a really pivotal part of the process is a website that I am working on with a few partners for survivors of domestic violence, sexual abuse, and rape. And it's called In Real Life. Can I give it a plug?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
It's www.irlife.com. And we have a free side of the site and a $25 a month paid side. And it's been really important to me to kind of move into the next phase of talking to people who are where I've been, and sharing parts of my story, and also still moving forward with my own processing of it as I remember things because of things that they say, or all different levels. So the story also changes as the years go by, because I realize more things. So at some point the memoir has to end. That's another thing, because I need to say, okay, this is what I know today about this, and I'm finished. I'll tell the story now.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so everyone knows, your bio will be on the page too, with the links to both your site, AngelaKelsey.com, and the In Real Life site.
Thank you.
So that people can access that. Because I remember when I first found you online, I think through Holy Jean, it was 2010. So you had just started really telling your story, I think, under your name. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Gosh. So let's talk a little bit about, you speak to groups and you tell your story, and your story is actually coming out in a big way, obviously, this year. You also teach workshops, and they're writing workshops. Mm-hmm. So do you teach them to survivors and then to just anyone, or how does that work?
Yeah, I've done some workshops only for survivors, but my ongoing workshop, you talk about the passage of time. This is amazingly the third year of a workshop in my neighborhood at the community center. So we meet every Wednesday night, and it is women only, but it's just for the community at large. And we use the Amherst method. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Patricia Schneider, she wrote a book called Writing Alone and with Others, and she teaches workshops on how to teach workshops. But one of her 5 essential affirmations that I just really love and remind my students of all the time is, a writer is someone who writes. So we get together for 2 hours, and we write based on prompts that I make up based on some theme of the month. In April, we're going to use food as our theme. But the emphasis is on writing. We try to keep so everybody writes in 10-minute blocks, and then we go around a circle and read what we've written, and everybody reads, including me. So we keep the focus on the writing, but writing is, I believe, in and of itself, the process of writing and then reading aloud is empowering and therapeutic and all kinds of other things. So we keep the focus on the writing, but the group has a lot of side effects that I think are really good for people.
Mm-hmm.
and I love it. I always, no matter what my day has contained, or how tired I am when I get there, I always love it, and I'm always kind of energized by the process of writing with them.
Nice. And 3 years you've been doing this.
Yeah, it's really good. And I have some people who've been with me through, for the whole time, and then other people have kind of come in and out, and it's good.
Wow. So you are remarried?
No, I'm not remarried.
Oh, you're not. You have a partner, though.
I have a partner. Yeah.
Okay. So can you just speak a little bit to the sort of the emotional journey of leaving this abusive relationship and then falling in love again, and what did that look like? It's been,
I think it takes a special man, a special person to be in the role that, his name is Michael, so I'll just talk about Michael, that Michael's been in, because especially at the beginning, it was really hard for me to trust him. It was really hard for me to not think that, or it was hard for me to have a disagreement and to feel safe expressing my feelings if I disagreed. And sometimes I would go overboard it took me a while to find a medium, a way to express myself. So either I would be kind of over emphatic just to make sure that I could be very vehement about whatever I was thinking, and then alternatively I would tone it down a little too much because I would be worried about a reaction. And he's been strong enough to kind of weather the emotional storms, especially at the beginning. It's been a process of learning. It's sort of been just through a series of experiences and things that we've been through together that I trust him now, and I have trusted him for a couple years or longer, but it has been a process, and really grateful. I think it's an important process to have another relationship and go ahead and put some of the things that you work through things in one way in therapy and in your own head, and then some other things have to be kind of practiced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, healed in relationship with someone new.
Right. Yeah. Since the abuse happens in relationship, I think that the healing, a lot of the healing has to happen in relationship too.
Yeah. Yeah. And how about your family? Evan, I would imagine at some point you gave them the story.
Yeah. Yeah. They've always been very supportive to the extent that I allowed them to be. We are kind of we're a stoic bunch, which was part of why I was able to stay in and kind of absorb what I absorbed. Not supposed to make a big deal, and not supposed to make a scene about things. Mm-hmm. And they also had a different relationship with my ex-husband than I did too. But they've been very supportive, and they're supportive of they're very private, stoic and private. And so the blogging and the book and even stuff like what we're doing here are a little bit outside of the family box, but they're rolling with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting, huh? Everybody has their own experience, their own relationship with any sort of event like that. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing the story here and for sharing it in general, because it's amazing that you are able to share it and feel safe and help other people the way it worked out for you.
Yeah, I really feel like his death, I don't want to talk about obligation and responsibility, and I don't, that's part of it, but that's not and that's kind of the way it winds up being talked about, but it's more like opportunity. Let's talk about it as opportunity rather than obligation. It just puts me in such a unique position to be able to speak freely about it. And we didn't have children, so there are just a lot of reasons that I can speak about it without hurting people who are still would be affected. And so I am grateful that I can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, if anyone wants to find you for your book or for asking you to speak to their group or anything like that, AngelaKelsey.com is the way for them to contact you. And then in real life for support and for telling their own story. All right. Well, I'm going to ask you my final 3 questions.
Okay.
The first is, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about the world, what would you change?
I think I would like to change the way that people relate to power. And especially abuse victims, I think often are, but I think, it's probably a spectrum of abuse victims and women in general and then people in general. Some people are afraid of power, and they think that power necessarily leads to bad things and abuse and harm. And I think that I would like to my magic wand would help people to think of power to rather than power over. And I think that from our most intimate relationships to the most global relationships, that would do a lot of good things. Do you have a magic wand?
Do I? I wish I did. I wish I did. Yeah, I wish. I think our collective consciousness has a magic wand, and if enough of us
I like that.
Put our intentions there, we can gradually, it's a slow wave.
Okay. I like that.
What brings you the most joy right now?
Michael has 4 children and 3 grandchildren, and another grandchild will be born later this year. And I think that those family relationships, and especially the grandchildren, bring me tremendous joy, because that was one of the things that brought me the most grief through the marriage and in the aftermath of the marriage, that I wasn't going to have children, and that it felt like a whole section of human experience was closed off. And it's sort of unfolded that I get to have it. I get to know these children and know them from, the time that they're born even. So it's good. They bring me a lot of joy.
That's beautiful.
It is. It's extraordinary that it's played out this way.
Yeah. So, last question, what is one fun or interesting thing about you that makes you uniquely you?
I have a hard time thinking about fun and interesting and unique. I don't know if this is fun or interesting to anyone. I have pretty equal verbal and analytical abilities. So on standardized tests, I always scored almost identically on each side. And then for some parts of my day, I'm working with spreadsheets and numbers, and other parts of my day, I'm working with words and images. And I think the more I embrace that, the less schizophrenic I feel, and the more I can move between the two with some fluidity, instead of feeling like, gosh, why can't I just have one talent or the other, and just try to go ahead and be able to flow back and forth between the two things. Yeah.
Oh, that's neat. That's neat to be so even that way. I think that's probably pretty unusual.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fun. I love learning things about people that people don't normally share. It's fun.
I don't normally share that.
But it's really cool. It's like you have these dual superpowers. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Angela, for spending time with us today and for sharing your story, as I said. And I can't wait for your book to come out. It's very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a beautiful day.
You too.